Good morning, everybody. We are week 5 with the South Haven Business Hub Group with Deb Howe, and we have special guests today, Michelle Mollard, and of course Scott Wald. So I'll flip it over right now and see today's special guest of week 5.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for continuing to join us as the South Haven Region Business Hub goes through an entrepreneurial journey. We appreciate all our guests who continue to join us. Our first session, I just want to do a quick recap, was on what it takes to be an entrepreneur. It's not 40 hours a week, guys. Remember, we talked about that. We had our gentleman here who said he was working 90 hours a week. So our second session was on the importance of a business plan. And we had Sherry with us, who received some financial assistance because of the business plan she had put together. And our third session was on who's your target audience and who's your value proposition. And that was with Monique with the Fruit Street Market and kind of identifying who that was. And I'm happy to say she just received her funding on Thursday because she had a great business plan. Okay, continue to reiterate this business plan thing. Yes. And then this session today is going to be on retaining effective employees and how to attract them. So I want to thank Michelle and Scott for joining us, and we'll take it from there.
Well, welcome Michelle Mollard and Scott Wald. We are very happy to have you here for week 5, and we're going to talk about how to attract and retain effective employees today. So tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll start with you, Michelle.
Yes, Michelle Mollard. I am what's called an EOS implementer. EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, and I help business owners get what they want from their business. It's basically a business coach.
Nice.
Yes.
Scott, tell me a little about yourself.
I am Scott Wall. I own New Age Laboratories here in South Haven. I've been the CEO president of New Age for 25 years, and we originally started down in Benton Harbor, and in 2009 we transitioned up here to South Haven to be closer to basically our families and the community that we really involve with on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. So Michelle, you started with EOS when?
I started with EOS as an implementer about 4 years ago. So
Okay.
the journey has been strange and fun. It was COVID, if you guys remember, in that time period. So that was a really fun one. But I've had about 25 clients come through with me. So the experience is much through with the clients. And when it comes to this topic, than it is actually for me.
COVID just seems like a dream at this point.
A dream.
Yeah, did that really happen? Well,
Yes.
tell me, since COVID and what you've seen, what are some of your biggest challenges you've had to deal with?
Yeah, actually, Scott and I were talking a little bit off mic and just talking about some of those things that what we used to think were normal and always the way we needed to do it.
Yeah.
We just don't need to do it that way, and we need to think outside the box and not treat everybody exactly the same. Even our policies, I know HR folks, you're freaking out when I say that right now, but our policies don't have to be so cookie cutter. We've got to make sure that we're still legal and compliant, but I think that's one of the things that I thought was really great, and
Yeah.
I'll feed off of what you were talking about, Scott, before.
I absolutely agree. I grew up with a very conservative father. He was in banking, and there was one way to manage employees, and it was you held a very tight rein, and it was this is how you ran a business. And when I started, I wanted to be a little bit different, and I thought it was very liberal. And then back in 2013, I ended up with cancer, and that I became a lot more relaxed then. And then COVID changed everything up.
Right.
And now what we're finding is and what I realize is that when I have a problem with an employee, it's usually my failure. I have failed to figure out that person in some way, shape, or form. And what I found with my business is that the cost of retraining and the loss is so much greater. And so I really try to put so much more time into retention and figuring out what's going wrong.
Right.
And unless I can't just figure it out, if it's just a train
Wrong
wreck,
fit, yeah.
I would much rather invest time in figuring out
Right.
what's the right, where's the puzzle,
Right.
what's the right figure.
Right, and when the puzzle piece doesn't fit, then it's time to, so there's a saying out there, right? So hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
And that still is. I know that people think that was back in the day, and that still is. And some of the things that I wanted to touch on, I'm not sure how you guys feel about it, but it really is. I want to repel people. Like, I literally do not want people in my organization that do not bleed my core values. I cannot teach, EOS has humbly confident, grow or die, some of those things. I can't teach that. I can teach you how to make a widget or pull or anything, right? I mean, they have to have some knowledge and skills and capacity to do that. But I don't know how you feel about that. I really think that is, at some point then, when they don't bleed our core values and they can't get it, we gotta go.
I totally agree. I can look at a resume and say, okay, fine, great. I'm glad you've given me this point. I can teach a skill.
Yes.
I can teach every skill.
Yes.
I don't care what your resume says, what your education is. I can teach a skill. I need to know whether or not you can fit with my team. I need to know if your personality fits with our corporate personality.
Yes.
That's what makes the right fit.
Absolutely.
And that's tough in interviewing.
Oh.
That is a real, boy, I've been fooled a lot. I mean, let's put it this way. Figuring out how to interview and really solve whether or not I'm hiring what I think I'm hiring. Talk about a big challenge. That's it right there.
Yeah, and that's great in that I think that, obviously for the way we teach and coach clients is all about those core values and then to really hone in. So if you ask them, share with me a time where you've shown you being humbly confident, right? And they kind of spin off something, then just ask why. Right? So a little nugget here, people, right? It's a challenge, but the fix is dig deeper. The fix is, well, tell me more about that. Who was Sally? Was she your boss? So, not being funny, when you're getting fooled, they can't perpetuate that lie, digging all the way through. They'll stumble over it. And Sally then changes to Bob. So hopefully that doesn't happen, but that's how we can dig into that kind of behavioral-based interview is really digging into that. So, I think that's really great. But your challenge is right. It is a tough one.
Yeah, and just this weekend, we had a very interesting conversation. I was talking with some individuals that hire in a very structured format, government, and so they have to come up with the same exact questions that they have to ask every single individual. I could never interview that way because every person sitting down in front of me is uniquely different. And so to follow through on that questioning, to say, okay, well, how did you do with that situation? Wouldn't fit for them because it would fall. It would and it opens them up because they're structured that way. And I think that is difficult to me. But
I think that's challenges too. Is that flexibility, right? We really do want that flexibility, and sometimes when we can't have it, it adds to an extra layer of our complexity as a business. And so, how do we, how is 50% of it structured enough? And then the other 50 is kind of bob and weave and, be flexible and kind of tailor that to what it is. Because we don't, I think knowing a little bit about your business that I do, you don't do that solution the exact same time for every customer. I mean, right? And so it's like, this is what we do. This is our core focus. But it's not, right? So I think it's really great for our employees to have that consistency.
It is. And then once you've hired somebody, now you really have to work at managing all the individuals together.
Correct.
And, I always say it's like running an adult kindergarten. But the fact is, you can say leave your personal life outside the doors and leave business here. But that's never going to be the case. If something's going on in their home life, it's going to end up in the business. And if things are, those things, they may not talk about it, but it's on their mind. It's in their heart. And now when somebody says something to them, emotions come out, and it's not always understood. And this is what perpetuates things falling apart at the seams. And so communication, professional level communication is difficult. And when it falls apart, the buck stops at the top. You either help perpetuate professional communication and that kind of thing, or you don't.
And no, for sure. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we kind of feeding off of that, one of the things that we talk about is kind of that benefit of the doubt. Right? So if you come after me and I'm hangry, we were talking about that earlier, and I bark back, the benefit of the doubt is something's going on with Michelle because that's not who she really is. That's not how she fits in our culture, and that's a one-off as opposed to taking that and veering off. So how did we build this, kind of culture of accountability, which then ultimately builds this retention strategy amongst themselves, right? And saying, you know what? you know, I'm just guessing Scott's just having a bad day today. And, you know, if I know him well enough, will I say, you all right, man?
Yeah.
Right? And how do we start doing that with each other? Because the buck shouldn't stop with you. The buck should stop with each other and caring enough about each other to a certain extent, right? Not everybody, you don't love everybody you work with. But
No, and you don't have to.
Correct.
You know, it's not, you can't mandate people to like everyone,
Nope.
but you do ask them to professionally respect
Correct.
each other and to treat each other respectfully and professionally in the work atmosphere.
For sure.
But you know, like I said, failures happen, and
Right.
when they do, you have to own up to it. And boy, there's plenty of them that I've had. So
All right, and so that was great. That was just great to listen to what both of you guys talked about on challenges. Tell me about what's been your biggest success.
Why don't you start it off? I started off the last one.
you know, that's interesting because biggest success. I'd like to say that New Age Laboratories has been just financial wonderkin, but that's not always true. I mean, small businesses struggle, and I've had numerous of them, but that doesn't mean that we haven't been successful. You know, I talk about my failures, and my kids and stuff will say, no, you're tremendously successful. And when I look back over that, I have to say that when I pick out the things that were really successful over the 25 years that we've been around, two things stand out. We've persevered. As a small business, we've been in business for 25 years.
Grit.
Okay. Exactly. You know, I have a business coach. Steve Cummings is my mentor and business coach.
Good.
Okay. I've been doing this for 25 years. I shouldn't need a business coach, right? Well, no, you have to put your ego aside, and you have to know that you constantly have to be learning something. But perseverance. Even when people are telling you you need to declare bankruptcy, you need to close down and stop throwing bad money after good. I had to persevere. I was not willing to let that go. And the second one was customer satisfaction, customer focused. You know, I always make sure that we put our customer first. Even if we're struggling, our customer, we have to make sure that our customers come first. And if we do those two things, at least people are talking positively about what we're doing. Give quality and take care of the long term. You know, and I think those are our biggest successes long term.
I'd love to feed off of that customer first, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe it's more of a question back to you, but at one point in your brain, did it go, there's something that would be customer first that's detrimental though, right? And I think that's where we have to kind of, where is that balance of we're losing ourselves for the customer, right? And so I think that's one of the challenges that kind of the biggest success that I've seen is absolutely customer focused, but who are our customers and knowing exactly who that is and who we're going after as opposed to taking everything. Now, those of you that are in startups, take everything, pay the bills. I get it, but as you start to get more seasoned in the business, some of those greater successes come with you being very focused and honestly, not taking on clients.
Oh, yeah.
Or firing clients over a period of time.
Yeah.
So that's some of the successes. What do you?
Two things that come into play there.
Yeah.
We wanted to be everything for everybody.
You did, okay,
right?
Originally.
And so in the laboratory industry, in order to be everything for everybody, you had to buy, you had to have all the equipment, you had to have all the instrumentation, you had to have expertise in all those areas. Well, that's expensive, and it takes a lot of capital. And you didn't always have the expertise. You might be able to say you could do it, but you weren't always really good at it. And you didn't do it often enough to be very good at it. And sometimes it wasn't a wise choice. Now today we are starting to continually narrow down what we do, and we have our niches that we say, no, we're the experts in this area.
Yeah.
The other side of it is, don't. When we were in environmental work, we accepted contracts that had payment terms that were extremely not beneficial to us
For your cash flow.
because we thought that, well, this was the way the industry was. We couldn't not do the work because that's the way the industry was. Well, so some of these terms were paid when paid. That meant we didn't get paid until our client got paid by their client, or 120 days or 180 days. it was a disaster because we had to pay all of our vendors, like when we rented a generator. Well, that had to get paid in 30 days, and it was terrible.
Right.
And so we just stopped paying it. We just stopped doing those kind of contracts.
Right. Well, then looking for those things that fit in, right? And so again,
Yep.
whether it's a great customer, it doesn't mean it's a great customer relationship. It doesn't mean it's a great payment side. There's lots of things that go into decision making around a successful client vendor relationship, and I think that really matters. And again, in the beginning, I get it, but as time goes on, the more seasoned organizations get, that's definitely look at that whole picture and make sure that those clients are really right in everything, whether it's B2B or B2C or any of that.
Yeah.
It really does matter.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's a big thing is that I think a lot of people drive their price down to get business without really knowing where their margin is.
There's that
And
too.
pretty soon they don't
We're
realize.
talking about successes, Scott. No, I'm just kidding. No, but you're right.
But
no, you're right. You're right. Please go. I just
They're
was
doing business at a loss,
No.
and pretty soon they're actually selling themselves out of business. They're doing volume,
Yes.
but they're doing volume at a loss.
Correct.
And sometimes it's better to do less work
Yes.
at a bigger margin.
Yes.
And now you don't have to hire as many people.
Correct.
Maybe you don't need as much stuff. Do less work, but at a better margin. Do
And
quality work, and
Yeah.
have a reputation for quality work.
For sure. And I think that aspect of Field of Dreams, right? If you build it, they will come.
Yes.
Is if you bill it like that, they will come. If you have that culture, they will come, right? So employees as well is like, oh my gosh, they're doing good work. They're in a variety of different industries, whatever it is that may be able to have you attract good employees for that. All of that matters as well.
Yeah.
So.
You have to be able to explain why you might be higher in price.
Correct.
I mean, and it should have a real clear rationale as to why you're more expensive or why it's more expensive than the average price. But don't be afraid to justify why your cost is what your cost is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
All right, so let's wrap this up by what advice would you give other business owners or a potential business owner who's maybe a little afraid to take that leap?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing is it's hard to drive your employees to a space of accountability if you don't have measurables, right? And so people call them KPIs. You can call them all these fancy things, blech, right? Measurable scorecards. It's like, what are they accountable to do? And I joke around, don't have somebody do it on 6 cans of Monster or whatever, and then say, this is what we're going to hold it accountable to, right? So it has to measure to where you're getting. And I would think that's it. And so even from a startup standpoint is what do you want as an output? And then just have that very, very clear. I think that's one of the things that I think we don't rely on enough. And I think we also don't, probably more of a seasoned business, say we're at 6 million, salespeople have to do 3 million, and it's not even attainable without additional resources. And so the scorecard, the measurables need to be worked together collaboratively, because if management sets it and bonuses are based on it, they're not going to engage and they're not going to do it. And I think that goes to the topic of retention and all those things is what do you got to do, but it's also not having it completely out of reach that is impossible.
I used to call that management flavor of the month.
Yes.
Yeah, management would always have a changing goal.
Yes.
Because they were looking at some metrics that said, oh, well, we're not reaching our goal because this parameter, we're not reaching this parameter. So the parameters were constantly changing because they perceived that this particular metric was the metric that was holding them back from reaching their profitability.
Correct.
And so the goal for the employees was constantly changing. It was an ever-changing hoop to jump through.
Correct.
And pretty soon the employees stopped trying.
They definitely start.
I think when the two things when I talk to young or entering entrepreneurs is hire people that are smarter than you.
Yes.
And don't be
Hallelujah.
afraid to pay them more than you are going to make yourself. If I hire sales reps or if I hire a PhD microbiologist, who I have, Katie Woodhams, great, smart woman. Hire smarter than you. Don't be afraid to pay them more than you. You do not have to be the most important person in your company, because your company is going to succeed based on the quality of the person that you bring in.
Yeah.
Period.
Do you see in some of that evaluation also hiring the weakness, right? And so it's not only, you don't have to be great at everything. And I think that vulnerability that owners, I think this has been a huge shift, since COVID, is vulnerability in owners and saying, you know what, I don't know that.
Oh.
And that is okay to say, right? So if you're starting up, you do not need to be, everything to everybody, right? And we're talking about it for customers, but definitely from your leadership style. My leadership style is very, very different than my cohorts here in Michigan. So don't change that, right? And so I do think that ebb and flow of hiring that weakness or hiring that strength, whatever you need from a leadership team or any place, right?
Absolutely. As a small company, you as the owner will wear 100 hats. You eventually have to stop taking on all those hats. You have to hire other people to wear those hats. You have to train. If you stay in business long enough, just because you hired somebody and they're good, don't forget about their training. You have to continue to train them. Maybe they don't have management skills, but you hired them to do a technical skill, but now they're going to be doing some management because you're growing. Remember to go back and start helping them to learn how to manage, because maybe you have management skills. The other thing that I have to say, because I lived through it when I got cancer, prepare for the worst. Prepare for the unexpected. I had life insurance, so if I died, the company was well taken care of, my family was well taken care of. But what I didn't have was insurance that if I survived cancer but couldn't be in the company.
Day-to-day insurance?
Day-to-day. Exactly.
How do you operate the business? No. And if the knowledge is with you.
Key man insurance and so on and so forth. And if your family, if your business depends entirely upon you being in it, that's critical. And you need to have forethought on that. And then plan for capital. Most small companies don't capitalize themselves well enough. Make sure that you fund. You don't put everything into buying the company and then not have enough funds to run the company as you grow, or when you're going to have times when revenue's not there, and you need to be able to sustain yourself. So those are the types of things that I recommend for young and early entrepreneurs. I
think the one last thing that I'd love to see is how do you share your vision, right? So that's kind of the thing I think about, right? Is in the world of EOS, we call it a VTO, a Vision Traction Organizer, right? It's a 2-page strategic plan. It's very simple. But touch on that first. I know we don't have a lot of time, but sharing that vision. So for me, it's all about connecting every employee to the why. And your daughter's here with us today. That generation, I'm loving it because they're demanding it. They're saying, you can't just tell me to go make that widget and not know what that widget is. Right. How do you feel about connecting that why to the people?
That's it's a tough one. It really is. Because I can, we started out doing one thing and we've now pivoted. We started out working with the EPA. Okay. And NASA and stuff, doing environmental testing and responding to spills and cleaning up the environment. And in COVID, we basically took a big pivot, and we took our minor business, which was working in agriculture, and made it our major business. And now we do work with mostly agriculture and food safety, which really feeds my passion, because really quality food and helping farmers is just feeds everything about what I want. Okay. And we generate a lot of data. Okay. It's numbers on paper. Well, Joe DeGrandchamp here in town said to me, he says, Scott, I've got a pile of data sitting on my desk. What I need is information. and it stuck with me just from the standpoint that was, it hit with what I believe is that if you generate numbers, but you can't turn those numbers into actionable management and information for the end user, it's useless. So our mission, our vision is to take the data that we generate and actually turn it into actionable management information for our growers. So we're now one of only 2 labs in the entire North American continent that does a test called plant sap analysis. And it is all about a blood test for crops. And it helps growers steer crops to success in the growing season, that growing season. Not, how
5
did
years
we
from
do
now.
and let's do better next year. It's how do we do better this year?
Right now.
And it's growing, and it's new science, and it's a new look at how do we deal with, nutrient applications to fields and so on and so forth. So it's addressing environment, it's addressing nutrient density in our food that we eat and our livestock eat. That's what drives me. And so then how do I pass that along to the people that are out there? I guess more than anything, I pass it along through the passion that I express it and I speak about it. And
I want to work for you. I got your passion. I got it, right? And I do. I mean, I think it is, if you don't get it from that leader, then you just never will get it, right? It just doesn't fit you. It's okay. Like if someone said, Michelle, you have to go do underwater basket weaving, it's not my thing. Like it's just not my thing, right? And so know yourself too, right? And so I know we'll end on that note, but I do think it's passionate. I think it comes from the leader, comes from the top. And it drives it all the way through, right? Having the right employees, making sure that they're connected to our why, they're connected, they have measurables, right? That we're asking them really core values. We can teach the skills as long as they really are who we are. We really can mold the culture, not mold them, but mold the culture to really jump onto your passion. So I thank you for sharing that.
No, thank you. Appreciate the time today.
It's awesome.
I want to thank our two guests for joining us and sharing their experiences with how to attract and retain their employees and the value of leadership. Appreciate all their knowledge and skills that they bring to us. We are South Haven Region Business Hub. We have multiple subject matter experts who can help you along the way. I think Scott said it. Don't be afraid to ask out for help. We've been there, done there, walked in your shoes. Maybe have a skill set you don't happen to have. We provide our services for free for the most part, so let us know. Keep us in contact. Next week we'll be talking to 4 different financial providers who I would call non-traditional ways to receive funding. And 2 of our guests this past series have just received funding from them. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Debbie. Appreciate you.